Now, women make up more than half of the U.S. population, and people of color make up nearly 40%. But according to a new study from the Women's Media Center, newsroom staffs across the country do not reflect that diversity. Take a look at this. According to the report, women of color represent just under 8% of print newsrooms, 12.6% of local TV news staff, and 6.2% of local radio staff. Cristal Williams Chancellor is Director of Communications for the Women's Media Center, and she joins us now from Washington to talk about this. And we should note, Cristal, this is all happening with the backdrop of the Me Too and Time's Up movements, highlighting patterns of sexual harassment, wage discrimination, and other injustices. Are you hopeful that this report and those conversations are kind of happening hand in hand, or does this report also highlight some of the resistance that's out there?
This report shows that there continues to be challenges within the industry. We are hopeful that the industry will see this as a wake-up call and will continue to be more vigilant about representing women of color, whether that be Black, Asians, Native American, or Hispanic women.
How, though, do you get there? You note that this is the 50th anniversary of the Kerner Commission report. As you mentioned, at that time, really criticized American media for not covering race issues sufficiently after the '67 race riots, and the finding being that communities act out when they feel like they're not being reflected, they're not being heard on the national stage. That's 5 decades ago. What are the barriers to inclusion at this current moment, and how do you overcome them?
The barriers are, unfortunately, the same barriers that have existed for decades. That is racism, sexism, and the old boys network. The women that we interviewed for this report, and there are nearly 30 who were interviewed, including Soledad O'Brien, Joy Reid, Ann Curry, and women who are practicing their craft very excellently in television, radio, digital news, and print industry. We are hopeful that this will change things because we are hopeful that newsrooms will be more intentional in looking at these numbers, recognizing that there has not been much change over 30, 40 years. These numbers are indicative of the fact that across the board, the news media has not been true in representing all voices, and we know that in order for media to be credible, it must be inclusive.
Now, I saw online Soledad O'Brien via Twitter criticizing a CNN staffer, Chris Cillizza, for a report he did about characterizing the Trump presidency as a reality show. I mean, she skewered him online, basically saying he needs to do better. I can think of a decade ago where you would have never imagined seeing Soledad O'Brien call out a journalist of another network. Is that the type of thing you are advocating for journalists of color and women to really just call out things that are unfair when they see them? I mean, what kind of advice do you suggest to working journalists of color and minorities out there today?
I do, and Soledad is one of the women that we profiled in the report, and she talks about when she was at CNN how there was a need for a change, and so she decided to create her own media. We do encourage women journalists to call out the injustices that they see in the media, to continue to be very vigilant about the work that they do in the trenches, and to require that news organizations be more transparent with the public and throughout the industry.
You know, you mentioned CNN. I worked there for a time, and it was at a time when the current head of the network, Jeff Zucker, was criticized by the National Association of Black Journalists for firing minorities, not just in front of, but behind the camera, because of 10% layoffs that were happening everywhere. Following that complaint, Jeff Zucker pulled funding for the NABJ convention that year. Do you feel confident that current executives just need to tweak and adjust what they do, or are you calling for wholesale change on behalf of the men, mostly white men, who lead major news networks?
Well, these numbers show that the tweaking is not working, that there has to be a wholesale change. The industry needs to be more accountable to the public it serves. And as a result of the work of Soledad O'Brien, Joy Reid, and other women who are in the trenches, including the organizations like the National Association of Black Journalists, the National Association of Hispanic Journalists, and the Asian American Journalism Associations, are calling the industry to task and will continue to do so, as will the Women's Media Center. We feel that news organizations need to represent the audience that it serves, and it cannot do that unless the stories, voices, and experiences of women of color are part of that story.
That's a very good point, and I appreciate so much the work that you do. Cristal Williams Chancellor, thanks for your time today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.